From the banks of Dewey Lake, it's the Dewey Pod Monster.
All right, we are back. My name is John, and this is the Dewey Pod Monster podcast. This is your weekly podcast about consumption. With me this week, as always, he once drank an entire flight of Flying Buffalo, the whole lineup, one through however many, in one sitting. And he is the authority on Michigan craft beer. He is also stretching that authority outside of state lines now. Sean, how are you doing this week?
I'm good. I was half expecting for Bill Brasky to join the conversation. I didn't know we had a guest this week.
I mean, I wish we had Bill Brasky here. That might bump our numbers up a little bit.
Bill Brasky.
I haven't heard that name in a while. So, how you been?
Good. I just got back from vacation.
Yeah,
it was nice.
Did you get a chance to? I'm not going to ask you to divulge your personal details or anything, but did you get a chance to catch up on anything while you were on the road, or well, I guess not while you were on the road, but while you were vacationing?
I was watching movies while I was driving. I'm irresponsible. No, I wasn't doing that. No, not really. I just kind of.
I wouldn't put it past you.
Yeah, well, hey, I like tech, but I like my life too, so I didn't do that.
What was that last quote you really liked? It's called tack, fuckwad.
Yeah. It's called tack, fuckwad. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I didn't really catch up. The only new thing that I watched, and it was like, I wish I had that time back, was on the new Uncharted movie, or I guess it's not that new, but as of a couple months ago, that was not great.
It's basically just an Indiana Jones knockoff, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's based on the video games, PlayStation games, but I guess in a way it's nice because they do pay a little bit of fan service. There's stuff directly lifted from the games. Like the opening scene from the movie is actually a sequence that you do in the game. I think it's Uncharted 2 you do it. And they do a sequence with Nathan Drake and his brother, and that's lifted out of 3, I think. So it does the fan service thing, but it's like they do a lot of action, but it's almost, there's nothing to hold it together. So it's just set action piece to next piece to next piece. The story's really thin and really not great. So it just ends up coming across maybe a little bit corny, but I mean, I didn't enjoy it. My 12-year-old nephew loved it, but I was not a fan.
That's how I feel about a lot of modern action movies, is it feels like a lot of okay, you can make an explosion, but I don't need much of a story, but I need enough to know how we got from point A to point B.
Yeah. So. I mean, this had that bare minimum, but it was just, I don't know. I kind of started tuning out when it's one of those movies where, and we've talked about these in the past, where you get about an hour in and it feels like you've watched the whole movie. Like they've gone through so many plot points and you're like, oh, great, this movie must be over. And you look at your watch and it's like, no, there's another hour of this to go. So it was one of those personified. It was not, I didn't love it, but like I said, for the 12-year-olds out there that listen to this podcast, you may enjoy Uncharted.
It's 12-year-old fuckwads. I had one of those, kept looking at my watch movies this week too. I thought I would catch up on more because for a little behind the scenes because of your vacation, we didn't record anything last week. So I was just kind of catching up on things that whether we do or don't cover them on this show, I, for whatever reason, had some interest in them. One of them was that new Adam Sandler movie, Hustle, that's on Netflix, which people are apparently liking him in. And he's actually pretty good in this movie. From the handful of times when I've seen Adam Sandler not act like, I don't know, I don't want to say Billy Madison or Happy Gilmore because I like those two movies, but maybe Little Nicky. What's one? Mr. Yeah, there you go. That's a good one. When he's not acting like Little Nicky and he's actually doing a dramatic role, he's actually a pretty good actor. And he is good in this movie, but Jesus Christ, does this thing drag on? It feels like it's a 2-hour and 20-minute runtime. And I got to think at least an hour and 20 minutes of it is just workout montage of so the basic premise of the movie is this guy is trying to get into the NBA draft. Adam Sandler's a scout. He finds this guy out in Spain, drags him back to the States. And then the rest of the movie is this uphill battle to get into the draft. I mean, how many Rocky movies have we seen? You can cut the workout montage down to one, Eye of the Tiger and then just kind of move on.
Yeah, I mean, it's old hat at this point, right? I mean, I don't know. It's not that they can't make movies like this because, it's what else would we be watching? There's only like 6 different types of stories that you can write. But yeah, it gets a little old after a while.
Yeah. Speaking of gets a little old after a while, I also watched the new Beavis and Butthead movie that just came out last week, Beavis and Butthead Do the Universe. And, like The Simpsons hit a point where their animation changed because technology got better and they were able to make it like a bit more, I'm assuming a more productive way. So it didn't take them like a year to make an episode.
Yeah.
I think that's what happened here. But there's something about it when you take these old shows that are rooted in like the 90s and even the early, where it's the early aughts or whatever. And they kind of have that like look of like, yeah, this is sort of modern animation, but it's still kind of shitty looking, but you kind of like it for that reason. And then you just clean it up and make it like 4K and it doesn't translate as well. Like one of the early scenes in the movie, like, they're doing Beavis and Butthead things. And I'm like, why do they have like lighting shadows on their faces? Like, what the hell?
Oh yeah. I wouldn't have thought of that.
Well, and why would you do that? Because it's Beavis and Butthead. These guys do not need this much attention to detail. So
probably almost to their detriment at that point, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's another one. I mean, I used to love Beavis and Butthead. I still love Beavis and Butthead. Like I have a 6-hour like saved YouTube video that I don't want to tell people about because I know eventually it's going to get taken away for copyright infringement of all the music videos just playing straight through. It's got its moments where it's still Beavis and Butthead, but for the most part, it's like, yeah, maybe this is one that should have stayed retired 20 years ago, like when it first went off the air.
Yeah, I think there's something for me with Beavis and Butthead. It's at its best when it's at that really grungy, kind of grubby look, and when they kind of spruce it up. Yeah,
for sure.
It's like South Park. South Park has changed with technology, right? They've been able to put the show together in hours, it seems, because they're always on topic. But while they add new things like 3D or whatever really crazy weird stuff, they still seem to try to stick as... I haven't watched it in years now, so don't quote this. This isn't the gospel, right. But they still try to make it look like similar to the old shows. It's a little bit choppier, the old ones, and it's a little bit smoother now, obviously, reverse, but I kind of like that they've kept that same aesthetic. And I would, when I heard about the Beavis and Butthead thing, it seemed like that came out of nowhere. Like I heard about it a month ago that there was a movie coming out. Like, what? Movie's coming out? And then it's out. And that's a little bit disappointing. I guess
they're making more shows too, but I haven't seen, I had Paramount Plus and I haven't seen any new episodes pop up of it yet, but I'm sure I'll look at it. So.
Yeah, when it came back that second time and they do like commentary about Jersey Shore and other MTV like reality shows that they had. Well, they don't have videos, so it makes sense that that's what they would do. But
right.
I wonder how that is for licensing. What kind of nightmare that is.
I guess it's owned by MTV, the same network,
right?
Yeah. With South Park, though, I think they've actually done a better job at how, because I tend to go on like little phases with South Park. I'll wait till their season's done, and then I'll kind of cherry pick a handful of episodes and just kind of power through them, and then forget about it for 6-7 months or whatever. I like how they still keep the look of the characters to that like 2D paper cut look.
Yeah.
But the things that are not the characters, like explosions, for example, have the same look as like Hollywood blockbusters and things like that. I think they've done a really good job of modernizing their animation while still keeping it look. It's not as grimy as like season 1, where you could tell it's like,
it's actually
cut
paper.
And paste, like, right. But it's still got that same feel while kind of evolving. That show's got to be on for what, 20 seasons now, something
least,
like that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's at least 20.
So probably more. That show's done pretty well with it. One show I didn't care for, there's this new show called The Bear on FX. Did you watch Shameless at all?
No, I had to think when you said Shameless, I like froze up for a second. No, I didn't watch it.
I watched it. I tried watching this show because one of the kids that was on that show is the main character on this, and his name escapes me now. Man, I gave this show 3 episodes. I'm like, fuck this show. Jeremy Allen White, that's his name. It's just like, somehow this show is like clocking in at 8.5 out of 10 in ratings. I'm like, fucking how? It's literally, so again, I gave up after 3 episodes because I was like, I don't need to be annoyed like just by watching TV.
Just look out my front door.
Yeah. It's literally just like people yelling at each other in a kitchen, and they're trying to give you this impression that it's this like his character has like a background as a high-end French chef and all this shit. But it's a sandwich shop in Chicago, dude. They have a Malort sign on top of the building. Like, you don't need to be yelling like that, bro.
How old is he supposed to be?
I don't know. I get the impression that he's fairly young. Like, I'd say probably 25 to 30-ish in the show. But if they said how old he actually is or his character is, I didn't catch it.
How much of a background could you really have, though? You know, as
well,
a
if
French
you're
chef,
25,
you could be a sous chef or something for a couple of years.
Well, they say that he went to some French school at like 18. They did say that, and that he went and, you know, blah, 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 whatever.
Yeah.
And then they yell at each other, and they're just shitty Chicago people throughout most of it. So that led me to kind of go back to the roots, though, because, well, before we get to our topic, I had one other thing I grabbed this week, and man, this is a bad fucking movie. But you kind of know what you're getting into just by the title. The title is called Don't Fuck in the Woods. So,
and that's not a porno?
No. Well, it's got a porn star in it, but it's technically not a porno. It's technically it's almost like a bad Predator spoof, except the Predator in this movie kind of looks like the bad guy from Power Rangers, but bigger.
Okay.
It's you know, I've listened to more new metal in the last 24 hours because of this fucking movie than I have in the last 10 years. It's not good, but again, it's a title called Don't Fuck in the Woods. Do you really think you're getting a quality movie here?
Yeah, that's true. I wouldn't have high expectations based on that title.
No, but it's short, so that's a plus. So more than I can say for most movies. So we do have a title we wanted to talk about this week, and this is one we talked about a little bit. We touched on when it first came out because I caught this one in the theater. It's now available in all kinds of platforms, but we're going to talk about The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, which is a 2022 release. It is currently 22nd on IMDb's top however many movies, which might be a new high for this show.
Yeah.
I think X was the only one that kind of got close to that.
It's classy.
It is classy. Both these are classy. So the basic premise of this movie is that Nicolas Cage is playing Nick Cage, spelled Nick. He's basically parodying himself as a struggling actor who takes a gig to go to a birthday party of a quote-unquote eccentric, I would assume billionaire, who turns out to have a little bit of a dark side in Pedro Pascal. And some other turns happen. Why don't we kind of backtrack here? What's your opinion on Nick Cage? Because he's kind of a divisive. I got a feeling we're probably on the same page with him. Page with the cage.
Yeah. On the Cage page.
But what's your opinion on Nick Cage as a whole?
You know, I think I've gone through fits and starts where I thought he was a good actor and I thought he was really tolerable. And then there were times when I think I had an opposite opinion, where when he went off the rails too much. And I know that's what some people really like about him, is when he goes unhinged. And at this point in my life of watching all these different movies and seeing all this different stuff, that's kind of, I like him either way. There's some things that if he's too over the top, I think it might turn me off a little bit, like the Bad Lieutenant type movie where he just kind of just goes off. But he's also playing a really eccentric and odd character, basically a drug addict, right? So
I never caught that. I saw the original, Harvey Keitel version of that, but I never saw the remake that he did.
Yeah. So these days, I think I do generally enjoy his movies. I've watched a couple of really recent ones. God, what was that one where Willy's Wonderland? I watched Willy's Wonderland. I watched Ghostland, something of the Ghostlands. There's like so many movies at this point, I can't remember what the names are, but they're okay. They're tolerable. But I think Nick Cage as an actor, I think he does some pretty good work. I
think there's been points in my life where I would probably adamantly say I could care less about Nick Cage.
Yeah.
But if I'm being honest with myself, he has two movies that, if it's available and I'm just kind of flipping through stuff looking for something to kind of mindlessly watch, that I will turn on every time without hesitation, in Con Air and The Rock. And I know those are both bad early 90s, like Bruckheimer, just oozing all that, terribleness, but they're fun. I think at the end of the day, he certainly has no shortage of movies that I can't stand.
Right.
Like, that I would prefer. Like, if I never watch 8mm again, I would be just fine with that.
Can I make an admission here? Much like my
Yeah, sure.
hatred of clowns. This is shameful.
Yeah,
It's a hidden shame.
You don't like snuff films?
No, I love those, but I have never seen. I've never seen The Rock.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I've never seen
That is a little
Jaws either.
shameful. Yeah, one of those is gonna change, if not both, at some point. So
Wouldn't be the first person to try.
yeah, but I have a different motive.
That's
It's a
true.
research project now.
That's true.
So
It's for science.
that's right. Yeah, I mean, he's got plenty of movies that I'm just kind of lukewarm on too. Like he's, as far as any actor goes that has the filmography that he does, he's as all over the map as anyone else. But I usually will at least give his movies a try, unless it's something that's like just totally not a genre that I care. Like I'm not going to watch a Nick Cage romance movie or something. I don't care. Unless I hear that it's so terrible that I have to watch it because it's Nick Cage being Nick Cage, then maybe I'll give it a try. But I'm not going to seek it out unless I have a reason other than thinking it's going to be enjoyable,
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah, I'm not a fanboy, but I think that he does good work. When he really has material to work with, I think he does a good job. But I think some, like you said, some of the movies are not things that I feel like I ever need to watch.
This would be a movie that I would say, when I heard the premise of the movie, I was on board right from the start. Like, I love the idea of him. We've seen other like movies in this, this vein before. Like there was My Name is Bruce, and even he did one in adaptation. And I'm sure there's others where actors are kind of playing a caricature of themselves. But the idea of him playing this kind of role where he seems, at least going into it, even before he watched it, it seemed like he was going to be okay with kind of poking fun at himself and kind of really embracing the side of him that is, for better or worse, loved and embraced by the internet.
Yeah, like the public persona that he kind of gives off, that he might subconsciously not even know that is the commentary about him.
Right. It seemed like he was going into it like, I didn't think he was going to make the movie like this if he wasn't going to try to have a good time with it, because otherwise it just seems like it would be miserable for everyone involved, first and foremost him. And this movie plays out, and to me, I thought this was a really fun one. Like, I mean, you get Nick Cage being his most Nick Cage and his least Nick Cage throughout this entire movie. It starts like right off with him embarrassing himself in front of David Gordon Green. So maybe he was trying to be the next Exorcist. I don't know. They didn't really say what he was reading for. He just starts yelling in front of a restaurant.
Yeah.
There's so many different ways you can really get to this, like as far as what he brings in this role as himself. You get to see him being a kind of shitty father, which I don't think that really, I've always heard that he's a really good father, but not so great a husband, for whatever that's worth.
Yeah.
But, wives are more replaceable than kids, I guess.
True.
So, he's a shitty husband. He's kind of a shitty father. He's a pretty moderately to heavy drinker, depending on the scene.
Yeah, I thought that was funny. There was a scene where he is being a shitty father, and he drinks, like he downs 2 glasses of bourbon or whatever it is, and within minutes he's just wasted. It's like, all right.
Yeah, as someone who drinks bourbon, it would probably not happen that quickly.
Yeah.
Or he has like the worst tolerance in the world. This is also someone who's brought out of like a drug-induced coma, but just by saying the word action, later in this same movie.
Yeah.
So you would think that his family members would know the secret kryptonite to sober him up, I guess. But, some other people that are in this movie. So aside from the 2 stars, Truth, I don't even know why I'm bringing them up, because really I'm of the opinion, unless you have Nick Cage and Pedro Pascal in a scene, like the rest of the characters are kind of flat. This movie really revolves around the relationship between those two. But for the sake of mentioning it, you have Tiffany Haddish and Ike
Barinholtz.
Yeah, him. They're playing these 2 CIA agents that essentially recruit Nick Cage to kind of spy on Javi, who is Pedro Pascal. You have his crazy brother or cousin or whatever he was, Paco Leon, who the only thing I ever see him playing is like drugged up Latin dudes. That's the only thing I've ever seen him in.
When I looked at his headshot, I was like, is that Jared Leto? Like, he looked like him in the headshot that I saw, but then in the movie, he doesn't look like him at all. I mean, you couldn't mistake the two, but just the headshot that they used for him.
I was actually surprised there weren't more cameos in this than what there was. Like, there was a couple, but most of the people that are in this movie, like, you have Neil Patrick Harris playing his agent, but he's not playing Neil Patrick Harris, the agent. He's just a character in this.
Yeah.
that's something that you see a lot in movies now, especially coming from the world of like Marvel and all that. It's like, oh, there's such and such guy where you have to sprinkle in however many Easter eggs and cameos. And there's plenty of Easter eggs in this movie if you're a Nick Cage fan, but there's no real, like, I don't know, like you would think you would have Ed Harris or something pop up because he's in The Rock. He's not dead yet, is he?
No.
Ed Harris?
No, Sean Connery is,
I
but
think
Ed
so.
Harris isn't.
I knew Sean Connery was. Or you like Dave Chappelle or something. He's in Con Air. You know, just random people that
Buscemi or somebody.
Yeah, Travolta or, you know, whoever.
That'd
like,
be good.
Right. Just you would think like some of these guys, like it would be a good like quip to get people into the theater, I guess, just to have all these cameos pop up. And it's not like anyone was really working in 2020. You could probably pull them out for a day just to do something. You don't really get a lot of that, which probably works to the benefit of this movie.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've rambled for a minute. What do you think about this one? So, like, up to where we're at so far.
Also, just to mention, Sharon Horgan plays his Olivia's ex-wife, who I've liked since Catastrophe. She was in that with Rob Delaney. It's a series. It doesn't have anything to do with this movie at all. But yeah, I mean, so just the ensemble works really well together. Basically, he goes to this island. He's hired for a birthday party. He needs the money. He's basically staying at I think it's called like the Hollywood Tower or something, but it's supposed to be like the Chateau Marmont. And he's $900,000 in debt to them for unpaid bills.
600.
Oh, is it 600?
It's because it was enough that he still would have made some money on the trip. I only remember that because I was like, oh, it's not like he's doing this just to pay the hotel.
He's not blowing his load on this one trip.
Right.
Yeah, so he gets hired to go to this guy's party. Javi, again, Pedro Pascal. I think they describe him actually as being like an olive. He has some kind of olive. I don't know if it's a plantation or what an olive vineyard. I don't know what the hell olives grow on vines. Do they grow on trees, right? Something. They grow on something. They grow somewhere. Anyways, out in Majorca. And so, yeah, he comes out for the birthday party, like immediately gets off the plane. And it's, you know, he realizes he's talking bad about Javi, but he doesn't realize that he's talking to Javi. So he's just kind of, you know, off the rails already and kind of makes a fool of himself. And the way he switches
gears, though, the way he switches gears when Javi reveals himself, it's flawless and it works perfectly. So it's actually one of the things, like we talk about pacing a lot on this show and like runtime and all that type of stuff. And the runtime's fine. Like I don't really have any complaint either way with that. But this movie is paced really well. And again, the director did a really good job of knowing exactly where to cut in the perfect line, the perfect joke, the perfect callback, the perfect whatever. It's paced out really well that anytime that it starts to stall out just a little bit, you get the thing where he does his stupid little like head bob thing
like
and
the bow.
Kinda saves it.
Bow to your sensei.
Right. Once he gets on the island, he's essentially he's almost like he's trying to drink himself away for the whole weekend, which is fine. But as soon as he, starts doing that, like it starts to kind of wear thin. And then he does I think it's the Leaving Las Vegas thing where he jumps in the pool with the open beer and tries to chug it underwater. It's either that one or it's one of his older ones.
Yeah.
I think it's Leaving Las Vegas. I haven't watched that one in a while.
That would make sense because he's trying to get out of the situation. Like he's just like, okay, I'm depressed. Let's just end this. But I thought, like you were mentioning, I thought there were so many moments in this movie that I literally laughed out loud. Like there aren't many movies where just a line is spoken, or some stupid sight gag happens, and you're just like, oh my, that's great. Like this is like perfect timing. Comedic timing was great. Nick Cage and Pedro Pascal work so well together. And the one character that we haven't mentioned yet is the younger Nick Cage comes, and he's like Nick Cage's alter ego, and he comes to like kick him in the balls to get him going. He's
not just his alter ego. This was a Nick Cage performance. It's actually one of my favorite Nick Cage performances. So for those of you at home, if you haven't seen it, look up Nicolas Cage and the Wogan Show. It is a show that was a British talk show. I'm assuming it's a late night show, but he comes out in that exact outfit with that exact hairdo, just coked up out of his gourd, yelling, screaming. And I mean, he is absolutely on fire in this interview. So when they brought back that Nick Cage and they put him in that outfit and had him do the whole thing, I damn near pissed myself laughing in the middle of the theater. It was so spot on. It's actually the only note I took on this episode because I wanted to remember what the name of the show was that he was on that popped up. But I mean, it goes to the point where he's straight up making out with himself in that version of Nick Cage at one point in this movie. And it is one of the most entertaining parts in this movie because it is so over the top and it's used almost to the point of like too much. And it just pulls back just enough to make it still funny.
Yeah, he makes a lot of appearances at the beginning and only a few at the end. And what does he say? What is the thing that he says when he actually kisses himself? He's like, Nick.
Well, I don't want to scream. Nick fucking Cage. But he says it a lot
well, he says something about like Nick Cage smooches. Nick Cage smooches.
Something like that.
And it was just like a great thing. And the one thing about that is when he first pops up on screen, I was like, oh, that's Nick Cage, but in makeup to make him look younger. But it's not. It's got to be like a deep fake or something because the person there.
It's a de-aging thing.
But there's a second person credited for the performance as young Nick Cage or Nicky because he goes by Nicky. So there's an actor credited for Nicky, and I think what they did is they just deep faked an old Nick Cage face because the face shape is almost a little bit different too. It's it's more narrow. His teeth are a little bit different, and I think that they deep faked an old performance on his face, on whoever's face it was.
I don't think they did. No, I'm looking at it right now. He's credited as both Nick Cage and Nicky.
I don't know. This be open
I know
for
he
debate.
does. Well, I mean, I guess it's going to depend on which fan edited site you want to look at, but. I've seen a couple interviews with the director where they said they just put a camera on him and said, he specifically said, say you're Nick effing Cage. And what you got was him screaming Nick fucking Cage this scream goes on for like a solid 2 seconds, at least in this, every time he does it. Yeah. It says Nick Cage / Nicky as Nicholas Kim Coppola is what I'm looking at.
I must have looked. Plex had a different actor's name. But it's deep fake. There's no way that this is just makeup.
What I had heard with it or watched with it, wherever I saw it. It's the de-aging stuff that they do like with Disney and all that shit.
Yeah, I don't know.
Either way, it's noticeable.
No, we have to argue about this for the next 15 minutes, John. You can't get off this easy. I'm just kidding. I'm not going to die on this hill. I don't care. I just thought it looked it was uncanny. There was something uncanny about the face. It was kind of like, ew, it's a little off-putting.
It's very noticeable, but it's also almost not to the point where it takes you out of it. And almost, if you want to give it like a thing to make sense, it's a figment of his imagination.
Yeah,
so
it's a mental,
doesn't have to look great.
It's a...
Yeah, it's like a hallucination, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
What's interesting about this, with all these great things we're saying about Nick Cage, I feel like at times he's almost overshadowed by Javi with his just like innocent, like boyish, like love affair with Nick Cage, all his characters, and his like dumbfounded, like jaw on the floor every time he's in the same room with this man that he's just paid $1 million to come be in his house.
Right. To hang out with him.
He's just absolutely dumbfounded and in awe by this, while at the same time walking around in like weird Speedos, bizarre, like outfits with like weird sunbathing scenes and shit like that, and just all kinds of goofy stuff like that. He does a good job of pulling Nick Cage out of his little funk and depression. We forgot to mention Nick Cage, before he gets to this island, claims that he's going to retire from acting, and that's kind of what builds their like, I'm not going to use the term that I keep hearing because I hate it, but they're like man-love affair with each other. I hate the term bromance. I don't want to throw that out there.
Man-love affair.
Man-love affair sounds better to me.
Oh, yeah. Sounds great.
It's perfect. He's using like his love of Nick Cage's movies basically to pull him back into being interested in acting. And essentially they're just two guys that bond over old shitty movies. It's kind of like they should just go start a podcast and talk about movies like Chopping Mall and the stuff.
Yeah. The ulterior motive is to bring him because he has a script. Javi has a script that he wants him to read. And he's like, will you do my movie? The agent never shows him the script, never shows Nick Cage the script. He asks him once under the influence of drinking and smoking weed or whatever to get him, will you do my movie? He's like, no, but I will help you make this movie. or I'll help
Yeah.
you write a movie or something like that. And it was like, he needs to spend more time. There's this
It's
whole,
funny how he shoots it down so quickly.
yeah, there's this whole overtone where the king of, is it the king of Spain or like a prime minister? I don't know how government works anywhere in the world, including the United States, but they kidnap somebody's daughter, a politician's daughter, to stop him from running for re-election.
So this is kind of where the B plot of the movie kicks in, because when Nick Cage gets to this island, we find out that the CIA is watching Javi, and they start following Nick Cage to use him as a way to kind of get closer to him, because they think he is in bed with this drug lord who kidnapped the Grand Dudas of Spain, whatever he is, his daughter. So that's where Tiffany Haddish and Ike, whoever,
Barinholtz.
yeah, him. I can't think. All I see of him whenever he's on is I think of him from the show The League, and that's about the only thing I can really think of him in other than this movie now. Anyway, so they're somewhere along, like, in one of Nick Cage's nights where he's just out power drinking. At some point, he leaves this, like, mansion, I guess, and goes to a bar, and they kind of throw him in a van, and they essentially break down that we're gonna use you as a operative or whatever to try and get intel on Javi and wherever this girl is. They guilt trip him up about his daughter, and that's the whole B plot to the movie. It's not really overly interesting. It does kind of lead to a couple of funny moments. Like I really like this. Like the first time he's doing his whole espionage thing, he's kind of talking to himself like, yeah, I'm really good at this. I'm going to be the head of the CIA or whatever. And just starts, they give him some kind of weird drug that goes on like a piece of plastic or something like that goes on his hand.
Something that's, yeah.
Yeah. And the concept of this drug, which I kind of hope this is real because it could be fun. Essentially, if you just touch a piece of skin with it, it's supposed to get you so high that you're essentially catatonic.
Well, I think eventually kills you.
Did they say it kills you? I thought it just knocked you out.
No, I think eventually it kills you, and he's going to like incapacitate a guard with it. And as he's leaving a room, he rubs his forehead. This is like one of my favorite scenes. Well, one of my two favorite scenes. There are several really great scenes, but this is like one of my favorite scenes in the movie. Is he rubs his forehead and he's like, "Oh my God, I think I just touched my forehead." And he's talking in an earpiece to the CIA guys.
No, I'm okay.
Yeah, he's like, "Are you sure? Or did you or didn't you?" He's like, "Oh no, I don't think I did. I think I'm gonna do it." And then he starts talking in slow motion. He's like, "My legs won't work," and he's got to escape. And he's climbing on this ledge. He climbs out of a window as a guy comes with a gun looking to see what the disturbance was, basically. And he's climbing on this ledge and he comes through and that's, he kind of collapses inside the room that he was in. He needs to get the antidote to give to himself. And he's like out. No, like he's dead. Like he's totally dead. And that's when Tiffany Haddish yells, "Oh, I got to have an idea." And she yells, "Action." And Nick Cage just springs to life as if nothing ever happened. He walks over and grabs the antidote and gives it to himself, and then he's back in business. But that was a great kind of set piece. It's a real good indicator of just
100%. It's 100% bullshit, but 100% entertaining at the same time.
And it's a really great set piece to show Nick Cage being this totally unhinged, why Nick Cage is Nick Cage, basically. Like why he's such a good performer.
Yeah. The other drug scene that really kind of, for me, I think tops this one is when, so basically after this, they convince him to stay longer to try and get more information on Javi. So he is trying to learn more about writing this script with Javi and learn more about their movie. And Javi has this idea. It's like, well, we need to take some acid.
Yeah.
So they take a bunch of LSD and go driving around. And I just like when the CIA texts them and they're like, "What are you doing? What's going on?" He goes, "It's taking longer than I thought." Then he doesn't respond. He goes, "I'm on acid right now." It's just all what the fuck?
And the guys, there's these guys sitting on a bench, and they're thinking they're kind of play acting this scene. And this is my other favorite scene in this movie. This whole kind of sequence of events that happens, but they're like kind of play acting like they're being followed, and they start actually getting paranoid. And there are these two old guys sitting on a bench, and like, I think those guys are following
ice
us
cream or something.
Yeah. I think those guys are following us. And he's like, "Oh, don't look. Just do a laugh and look over as you laugh, to kind of like, so you divert their attention." And Pedro Pascal, Javi, turns directly to look at them, directly in the eye, and just maniacally starts laughing. And it just sets these guys, they're like, what the hell? And then they run off, they jump this wall, and you realize there's this big emotional speech. And they jump over the wall, and the guys are like right there too, aren't they? Aren't they like right on the other side of the wall once they get down?
I think it's just a different point of view. Like, I think they just turn and they can, I think the gag in that.
Oh, they're so close to the first place after they take off.
I think they take off and they run to this wall, and I think they just turn around and they're just still have a clear like line of sight to where these two guys are, because they're still sitting on a bench. It's not like they got up and like
moved to a different bench.
Hell? They're just sitting there eating their ice cream or whatever they're doing. That's one of the few like scenes where I think that scene on the wall that you're talking about, because that scene ends with where it turns out like 2 feet away, the wall ends. Like they can just walk around the wall with no problem. I think in 99% of movies, if you put that gag in a movie, it wouldn't land. It would just be like, that was dumb.
Right.
But it really worked in this scene for whatever reason.
It's almost like Fairly Brother-esque, like that whole scene, like
a little bit.
But it does. I don't know. I mean, sure they could have made it work, but it just works so well because the movie already is presenting itself as being so just kind of goofy, absurd, funny. That it just totally works. That they're both high on acid. So it's kind of
right.
It really fits together. It was a really funny scene, and they get in a car and drive away, and Nick Cage is like, I think. Pedro Pascal can't drive, or did he hurt? He can't drive. He's like, I can't drive on acid.
Yeah.
And Nick Cage drives.
Even though he drove there on acid.
Right. And he smashes into everything on the way back. So that was, again, the whole sequence is just really funny.
And it's one of those things that it gives you vibes, and these are some really great movies that will give you vibes of like, it gives you like flashbacks to like Fear and Loathing, or, it's got moments where it kind of has that like Big Lebowski feel to it, where it's the way that it's unraveling the story. It just kind of builds up, but it never goes over the top, but it's ridiculous and funny throughout the whole thing. I will say, like, having watched it twice now, like watching it in the theater and then going back and watching a second time, you definitely pick up on a lot more the second time than you do the first time. Like it's not like going back to like South Park. I remember when that movie came out, I spent so much time laughing at that movie. I missed stuff just because I was still laughing at the joke that just came up. I missed it because I was laughing at the joke before it.
Yeah.
It's not that kind of movie.
Right.
Like, it is funny, but you have time to catch your breath between like really funny moments and get, from scene A to scene B or whatever. But it's got that kind of humor that the way it's written and the way that things are delivered, you're going to kind of find little things through it that you wouldn't have noticed on other watchings. I don't know how many times I'll go back to watch this, but I definitely can say that it's got if you want something that's not, gory or, violent or whatever, it's got a good rewatchability to it just off that kind of comedy.
Yeah, I'm already looking forward to watching it again. There are certain times when you're laughing at something and something else happens and it just kind of adds on, but right. You might miss something. It's hard to explain how this is directed specifically that does just kind of silly stuff that makes you laugh. But one thing really at the end, I won't get into what happens, but at the end, there's the scene where they're kind of, there's that standoff, right? Where they're kind of with the police or not the police, but like the guards or whatnot. Or they're at the embassy. And
yeah, because they always end at the embassy.
Sure. And they're with the original characters, Sharon Horgan, they're with Pedro Pascal. There's something that he doesn't come to the last scene, but they do this thing and then it cuts and it's the movie that they've been talking about. And there's nothing in it to give you the indication that they're going to do this cut, but it just cuts.
Right.
The people are different. There's actors there instead of the people that were in the scene. And it's like, oh, that's what they did. That's hilarious. Like that's a really great device to kind of just end the movie, because it's like that's really the last 5 minutes of the movie, essentially.
And between that, the movie does ratchet up. Like they have Javi tries to. I get the impression that he's trying to be like this nice guy and brings Nick Cage's family down to be there with them, because why wouldn't you want your family there? And he doesn't know that at this point that Nick Cage is kind of like eyeballing him as a possible like terrorist or whatever.
Yeah, everything's going a little bit too deep.
So that kind of creates a little bit of tension between them for a little bit. But watching them kind of, while Nick Cage's family is still there and in pretty big danger at this point of the movie. Watching them work out of this like tension between each other and just be like over the top, falling in love with each other is hilarious. Like the way that they do it, the way that they like the whole scene where they trade shoes is so stupid, but it works so well in that.
And then he insults the shoes. They insult each other's shoes because of what happens where they have to run.
Right. And to be fair, have you ever tried to run in a pair of Vans slip-ons? It doesn't work very well in those either.
Yeah, I've never tried to run. I've maybe run a short distance in slip-ons, but I don't think I've ever run in penny loafers.
I don't own penny loafers, but I can tell you that you had them in the past, not
as a youngster. Yeah,
I know. You had style. So
well, it's like your dress shoes. You dress up stuff.
Well, again, as an avid purchaser of Vans and Vans slip-ons, I can tell you that the running in those isn't much of a, I don't run much to begin with, but I would not pick them at all on my top 500 pairs of shoes to run in, I'm sure. But yeah, I mean, the way the movie ratchets up, like the thing that's weird about this movie, everything kind of plays out and makes sense. And it does play better the second time around than the first time around. The B plot, the whole CIA thing and the whole action movie, it almost takes away from what you really want to see in this movie.
I don't know if I agree with that. I think it's a good kind of buffer. I mean, it kind of is what they're talking about when they're putting the script together, like, there's parts in the movie that play out just along the way that they're talking about the script that they want to put together. They want to put together a movie that appeals to everybody. It has this, these two sensitive guys getting together and whatever, and then a kidnapping. And I think that the B plot really just, without the B plot, I don't know what else they would do. It would just like be they wouldn't have a way out.
It does kind of propel the story forward. Like it otherwise probably would just be them sitting there bullshitting about their favorite movies for 2 hours.
Yeah, and getting into slapstick scenarios.
Honestly, if you wanted to give me 2 hours of Pedro Pascal and Nick Cage running around doing LSD, I could think of worse ways to spend 2 hours.
Yeah, but I think that you're in the minority. I would like that too, but I think to make a movie that is going to sell to people that people want to watch, because, without the story, it's just like, oh, Pedro Pascal, that guy that plays the Mandalorian, and Nick Cage, they do wackety schmackety things, and just, I think without that B plot, it would just get kind of a little stale.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, you're right. It does, like say, it's definitely almost like a binder to the story in a lot of ways. But for me, like, if the two main characters aren't on the screen, I'm immediately less interested than whatever else is going on in the movie.
I mean, I'm not the biggest Tiffany Haddish fan, but I thought she was like very tolerable, which is like a high compliment for her, because I generally don't enjoy her.
I don't really know her that well, but I mean, she's fine. I don't really know her stuff that much.
Yeah.
Yeah, just looking at her right now, these are not movies I've seen, so that's fine. I mean, nothing against her. She was fine in this. She served her purpose. Her and Ike, both of them are fine. How'd you like the whole shrine to Nick Cage?
That was unexpected, and I thought it was funny. And that's a really funny scene where they go into this, as you mentioned, a shrine to Nick Cage, basically all the stuff that Javi has bought or has owned, that's all the stuff from his movies, up to Mandy, right? So and then he, at the end or in the middle of the room is it's not a wax figure, it's kind of like Nick Cage refers to it as a statue, but it's a statue of Nick Cage, and he talks about how repulsive and how like ugly this thing is, and he says, how much?
Calls it grotesque.
Yeah. How much did you pay for that? $2,000 or whatever. And he says, I'll give you $20,000. And Javi says, it's not for sale.
The best part about that joke is he's offering him $20,000 when you already know he's broke.
Right. And it only costs $2,000. That kind of goes towards the real life Nick Cage owning the, dinosaur skull and all the other crazy stuff that you've heard. I love the
dinosaur skull. Well, he doesn't own the dinosaur skull anymore.
Right.
I think it was Mongolia or whatever, they forced him to give it back, and they didn't pay him back for it either. So
I mean, this guy has owned, what did he own, like Superman #1 or something? He's owned like these, owns like all this crazy castles. Stuff. Yeah, castles, right. He has owned castles. I mean, that's why he's making all these movies, to pay the taxes and all the upkeep on this stuff. But this is one, I have to say, this I always forget the name of it. Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, because I always make fun of it and call it Unremarkable Talent. This is my favorite Nick Cage performance, probably of all time, and definitely of the last 15 years.
20 years.
Yeah, 15, 20 years of stuff that I've seen him in.
Mm-hmm. I won't go as far to say that it's my favorite of all time yet. I think if you ask me this next year, I might say something different. But right now, it's pretty high up there.
Do you have something that you know that he's doing that you're gonna love, or what's up with that?
No, I love Con Air that much.
Oh, okay.
So, but I mean, this movie is definitely, as far as, you mentioned some of the stuff that he's done recently. Like, you didn't say this one, but like there's Pig and was it Wally's whatever?
Yeah, Willy's Wonderland.
Yeah. These are not movies that are gonna. Personally, I'm not knocking him for doing these movies. I think it's cool that he wants to just work, and it seems like that's. Forget his like eccentric spending aside. Like, I think there's a part of him that just wants to be in a whole ton of movies, and that's admirable to an extent. He's not out there just trying to like show himself to Marvel or something like that, which is a joke that comes up a couple times in this movie. This is by far the most, not only the most well written, but probably the best acted, and I'd say probably the most approachable movie that he's done in a long fucking time.
Yeah.
I can't even think of one that would even really be, as far as like just a broad appeal, like people should enjoy this movie. I can't really think of another one that really, like I said, fits that mold.
Yeah, like
maybe
you said,
this
accessible.
You did that Christmas one, Family Man?
Oh, I didn't.
I think it was.
I didn't watch that. It's too
sensitive. But people like it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing too, is that the director of this movie and the writer, I think he had a writing partner, but Tom Gormican directed this, and I looked him up. Like, I wrote my note next to him, because I call this the Unbearable Weight of Unremarkable Talent. I wrote next to his name, director of some unremarkable movies. I don't recognize a single thing that he had done in the past, but this is like, where has this guy been? Like, this is a great movie that's really well written. It's really well directed. There's some scenes that, like I said, at the ending scene where it just kind of switches, it's like some of that's written, but some of that's directed too, so, and he did a majority of both. So I just thought, like, I'm kind of excited to see what he does next. And maybe that will kind of let us know, did this have the Nick Cage fairy dust, or was this, that he's a good director? Yeah,
I'm looking at him now, and he's only got a couple, as far as directing credits, he's only got 2 other things under his belt from what I'm seeing.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I haven't heard of either of these. But yeah, I'd be interested to see where he goes. I mean, I would give it another movie of his a shot just based off this for sure. And like I said, when I compared a movie to The Big Lebowski, that coming from me is a pretty huge compliment. So feeling like getting that kind of feeling where it's like, okay, this is quickly turning into the movie where I'm like, all right, I'm kind of shit-faced and I kind of don't want to do anything. I'm going to sit back and watch Nick Cage play Nick Cage for the next 2 hours and just kind of have a good time on a Saturday night or something like that.
Yeah.
Where, there's a very small number of movies that kind of fall into that category. And this one feels like it's quickly propelling itself into that tier.
Yeah, this is definitely going to be a movie for me. Like you said, Big Lebowski's one. I think Shawshank Redemption is one for me. That you can just, it's a go-to. Like, that you can watch it anytime. You're going to have a good time. You don't have to think too much. It's very entertaining. It is somewhat thought-provoking, but it's not like a big intelligentsia kind of film. This isn't like an A24 kind of film, or it doesn't feel like it. But yeah, I mean, I think this will be one that I can easily in the future say, I don't really want to watch something new or read subtitles or, one of those qualifications that you don't want to have to do when you're kind of maybe inebriated or maybe even just watching this with your friends. This is one that you can put on and just kind of sit back and let it take you on the journey.
And I think the question will be how long is it before I stop noticing new things in it? Because the movies that are really good like that, you tend to find new things kind of each, like, over the years as you watch them again and again. Like, how do I never notice that? Like, again, I use Lebowski as the example because I still find things in that movie that I somehow never noticed shit, was that 98? So a lot long 24 years ago. So,
Feels like yesterday.
right. Math. What do you put this at? Where do you put this one on the hot dog scale?
I feel like I have to preface this, but I really shouldn't. I want to say that this is not, I don't know, came out in 2022. I don't see this winning any Oscars, but for me.
It should. If Nick Cage won an Oscar for playing Nick Cage, I might start giving a shit about the Academy.
Yeah, well, don't plan on it. But yeah, I would
not.
I would say this would easily get an 8 out of 10 for me. Like, I really enjoyed it. I was not that I wasn't looking forward to watching this. I just felt like, what if it's not good? And then I turn around and watch it. I didn't know what to expect from it. Like, I didn't watch any real previews. I had heard about it. I knew that he was playing himself.
You told me to shut up after I watched it.
Yeah, I didn't want to know anything about it. I just wanted to watch it. Like, I wanted to go in blind and see it. And yeah, it totally exceeded my expectations. This was really funny. I had a really good time watching it. I think I'll speak for myself, saying that this is a movie that I can sit, not have to think about, turn on, be entertained by. I mean, that sits in the pantheon, like I said, Shawshank, Big Lebowski, Terminator, just like some movies you can just put on. You don't have to think about different genres of movies that you can turn on and not have to think about and still be entertained, even if it is like the 50th, 60th, plus time that you've seen it.
Yeah, for me, it's putting it in that group. Like, so it'd be Lebowski, Goodfellas, another one that's just not even close to the same type of like feel as those. But again, you just put it on whenever and be good. Hard time thinking of other ones right now. So there's not a whole lot of them that really get up there. Paddington 2. I've never seen it. This movie didn't make me want to watch it, though.
I might have to see it now.
You might cry.
I might. I mean, it's easy.
So
I cry all the time.
You dads and you're crying. Yeah, but I would agree with you. As far as like hot dogs go, I'd give it 8 hot dogs out of 10 Nick Cages. Like, no problem. It's like I said, I could see that again going up to 8.5 or even 9 over the course of time with it, but it's super enjoyable. It's really accessible right now. Like, I would go as far to say I wouldn't even waste your time renting it. If you want to buy it, just buy it. Obtain it legally. Don't do anything shitty. But yeah, I mean, I would definitely go as far as say this is one that, it's gonna have it unless you just don't like Nick Cage. I don't know how you wouldn't enjoy this movie.
This is available on all platforms from YouTube, Vudu, Google Play, Apple TV, Amazon Prime Video, etc., etc., etc. This got an 87%.
Pretty much wherever you can buy movies.
Yeah. It's got an 87% on Rotten Tomatoes. It's a 7.1 out of 10 on IMDb and 77% Metacritic.
And even like kind of whatever getting ready we do for this, like I tend to listen to a couple like reviews that I tend to like just to kind of I want to try to think about things I might not notice in the movie otherwise, especially if it's something that I've seen before. This one, there wasn't a lot of people that were really talking this movie down that I listened to or that I watch. That's kind of rare. Usually people find something to shit on a movie kind of regardless.
Yeah.
And I can only think of one critic that I heard that didn't really like it. So 1 out of like 10 is pretty good ratio.
Yeah. That's funny. I don't listen or read much criticism about anything. Maybe after the fact, after I'm like, what did I miss something? Is there, especially if it's not a good movie and I need to
well, I don't ever do it. I don't ever do it before I see the movie.
Oh, yeah.
Because I don't want that. But the only time I do it is when we're going to talk about something. I try to do it between first and second viewing most of the time. We haven't had a whole lot of movies I haven't watched at least twice that we've talked about yet.
Yeah.
So
I'll look at if there's something I feel like I missed, especially if it's something that's like really acclaimed or something and it kind of just fell off for me. I always look at those. Or just a movie I can't really figure out. I'll go on Wikipedia and like read about it, especially older movies. That's really easy to do.
I don't know. I like trying to get, especially doing this, like I like trying to get a opposing point of view or try to have someone who, you're never going to, on most movies, you're never going to catch everything the first time through. And I might be dumb. Sometimes I miss some pretty big plot points that like, I just, whatever happened, I just didn't see it. So it's always the same group of like 5 to 10, like, YouTubers basically that'll just kind of putz through. And I'm not looking for anything like when I see a video that's like 30 plus minutes. I'm like, nope.
Yeah.
Just move right on.
Yeah.
And some of them, it's like, I saw one on this movie. It's like 4 hours. I'm like, this is a 2-hour movie. What do you?
Yeah. What could you possibly talk about for 4 hours about this movie?
Right. Which will reiterate the Dewey Pod Monster rule. We will not talk about a movie longer than its runtime. So at least on one episode.
Right.
Yeah, that's why I usually do is I just kind of want to like think of other things that might be worth bringing up, especially with some of these like newer horror movies. It's like that we'll talk about it, but we're not talking about a horror movie today. We're talking about massive talent. So whatever. This is a great one. This is a fun movie to watch. Definitely would strongly recommend it. I don't know. The theaters are so weird now. Like if this is still available in theaters, it's worth going to check out in the theater. It's fun just for the environment on it. But regardless, having it hasn't been out that long. So, because we just talked about this maybe a month ago on one of these episodes.
Yeah.
But yeah, either way, do what you got to do. Check it out, watch it, stream it, whatever, pirate it, like we said not to do, whatever you got to do. You got anything you want to add to this before we start wrapping on this one?
No, I think that we've pretty much said it all. I like I said, this gets a super high recommendation from me too. This, like I said, sits in that pantheon of movies that you can just sit back and watch at any time. Maybe even if you've already seen it a couple times, even catch it in the middle, kind of like a Goodfellas for me, Shawshank. I can watch that movie whenever I catch it.
Man.
Oh, there you go.
Check this one out. In the meantime, as always, we're going to ask that you follow us on all the socials. We are at Dewey Pod Monster. Like us, review us, all that good stuff would be awesome. Share us through your socials. That would be helpful as well. Of course, we have the option that you can leave us a message. If you go to anchor.fm/Dewey Pod Monster, you can drop us a message. We'll play it back and, try to get some more interaction going on this show. In the meantime here, Sean, what do you got going on? You want to plug your plugs?
Check me out at youtube.drafttherapy.com. You can check out my videos. I talk about Michigan beer primarily, but also out-of-state beer. As we mentioned at the start of this podcast, I was on vacation in the Carolinas, so I'll be probably talking about some Carolina beer here for at least a couple weeks. And but mostly Michigan beer, and you can find me there or find me on all my social stuff at Draft Therapy, of course.
I like the mystery of it.
Yeah, you can check me out on socials wherever they are.
Right.
It's up to you.
Everybody likes a challenge. All right, well, you guys have yourself a great week. We'll be back next week and talk to you soon. Cheers.